For my entire life, I was the quiet, unassuming shadow, and my older sister Clara was the blinding, scorching sun. That was the unspoken, ironclad, irrefutable dynamic of our family, established before I could even walk. Clara was the undisputed golden child, loud, fiercely charismatic, traditionally beautiful with her cascading blonde hair, and endlessly, exhaustingly demanding of every single ounce of oxygen in any room she entered. My parents worshipped the very ground she walked on. They treated her every minor, insignificant achievement as a historic milestone, worthy of a parade, and her every tantrum, failure, or slight as a devastating tragedy that needed to be immediately, frantically soothed with expensive gifts, lavish vacations, and groveling apologies. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, invisible, thoroughly unremarkable one. I was the reliable, self-sufficient, painfully compliant daughter who got perfect grades because I had to, who paid for her own college education through grueling academic scholarships and 3 simultaneous part-time jobs, and who never asked for a single thing, simply because I knew with absolute certainty that the answer would always be a dismissive sigh and a roll of the eyes. I grew up fundamentally believing that my only acceptable role in the family ecosystem was to be the sturdy, uncomplaining, completely silent background scenery for Clara's grand, ongoing, highly dramatic theatrical performance. I was the stagehand, she was the star. Despite the constant, agonizing emotional neglect that defined my childhood and early adulthood, I always held on to a fragile, foolish, childlike hope that one day, eventually, my parents would truly see me. I thought that if I was just good enough, successful enough, accommodating enough, and generous enough, they would eventually carve out a tiny, warm space in their hearts just for me. That desperate, pathetic, hollow hope was the invisible chain that kept me firmly anchored to them, even long after I had built a highly successful, lucrative career as a senior software architect, quietly amassing a significant fortune in my 20s. Meanwhile, Clara bounced effortlessly from one failed, outrageously expensive passion project to another, a failed jewelry line, an abandoned yoga studio, a disastrous attempt at becoming a lifestyle influencer, all of it entirely funded by my aging, financially irresponsible parents. What my parents and Clara didn't know, or what they had conveniently chosen to completely ignore, because the truth was too humiliating to bear, was the actual, terrifying financial reality of our lives. 5 years ago, my father's mid-sized logistics business had catastrophically, spectacularly failed due to his own chronic mismanagement, his refusal to adapt to modern technology, and his habit of embezzling his own company's funds to pay for Clara's extravagant lifestyle. They were completely drowning in insurmountable debt. They were actively facing imminent foreclosure on the beautiful, sprawling, 5-bedroom suburban family home we had grown up in, and they were completely, utterly out of options. Clara, of course, was entirely useless in the crisis, crying about how a foreclosure would ruin her personal brand. I was the one who stepped in from the shadows. I quietly, efficiently paid off the entirety of their crushing 6-figure debt. I bought the house directly from the bank, right out from under the foreclosure proceedings, completely and legally transferring the deed into an anonymous corporate LLC that I legally owned as the sole proprietor. I became their landlord, but I never charged them a dime of rent. I paid the exorbitant property taxes every quarter. I paid the massive utility bills to keep the lights on and the central heating running. I even paid for Clara's massive, unlimited cell phone bill, her premium car insurance, and the staggering monthly lease on the luxury, fully loaded Range Rover she paraded around town in, all out of a deeply misplaced, toxic sense of familial duty and a desperate desire to finally be the hero they loved. They lived under my roof, entirely funded by my hard work, my stress, and my sleepless nights, while continuing to treat me like an unwanted, irritating, slightly embarrassing guest in my own home. Clara's entire, glamorous, arrogant, Instagram-perfect existence was a fragile, paper-thin house of cards, and my bank account was the absolute only thing holding up the foundation. My 30th birthday was supposed to be a massive, definitive turning point for me. It was a milestone I had reached after years of grueling, relentless corporate work, and for the first time in my entire life, I wanted to actually genuinely celebrate myself. I didn't want to hide in my room. I wanted to take up space. I decided to host a small, elegant, intimate dinner party at the sprawling, beautiful suburban house I legally owned but shared with my parents and Clara. I had spent 2 meticulous weeks planning every single detail. I bought expensive vintage French wines. I cooked a massive, intricate, multi-course feast entirely from scratch, spending 3 days prepping sauces and marinating meats. I invited 4 of my closest, most supportive friends from the tech industry. But the absolute, undisputed centerpiece of the evening was the birthday cake. I had never had a custom, professional birthday cake before. My entire life, my birthdays were celebrated with whatever stale, generic sheet cake was on sale at the local grocery store, usually picked up by my father as an afterthought. This year, I went to a highly exclusive, renowned boutique bakery downtown. I sat with the pastry chef and ordered a breathtaking, massive, 3-tiered, dark chocolate and raspberry ganache cake. It was flawlessly decorated with delicate, edible, hand-spun gold leaf and incredibly intricate, lifelike sugar flowers. It was a $500 entirely frivolous, beautiful, indulgent masterpiece. It was a profound gift to myself, a physical representation of celebrating my own survival through 3 decades of being entirely invisible. The dinner was going surprisingly, wonderfully well, which, looking back with absolute clarity, was exactly what triggered Clara's psychotic break. For 3 solid hours, Clara was not the absolute center of attention. She wasn't the star. My friends were toasting me, raising their expensive crystal wine glasses, praising my recent promotion to senior architect, laughing at my jokes, and asking me engaging, genuine questions about my life and my future goals. I could see Clara sitting at the far end of the long mahogany dining table, her posture rigid, her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might shatter. She was aggressively, rhythmically swirling her red wine in her glass, her eyes narrowing into slits of dark, toxic, unadulterated resentment. She tried to hijack the conversation several times, loudly interrupting to bring up her recent, highly dramatic breakup with a personal trainer, or her upcoming, spiritually cleansing trip to Tulum that I was unknowingly paying for. But my friends, who knew exactly what she was, simply offered polite, one-word responses and smoothly, deliberately steered the focus right back to me. The pressure inside Clara's fragile, massive, unearned ego was building to an explosive, catastrophic point. She was physically vibrating with jealousy. When it was finally time for dessert, I excused myself and walked into the quiet kitchen to carefully retrieve the cake from the massive refrigerator. I placed it gently on the counter. I lit the tall, elegant golden candles one by one. The soft, warm, flickering light illuminated the beautiful, flawless sugar flowers and the rich, dark chocolate. Standing there alone in the kitchen, listening to the muffled laughter of my friends in the other room, I felt a rare, genuine, profound spark of pure, unadulterated joy. I felt proud of myself. I picked up the heavy, thick glass cake stand, balancing it carefully in my hands, and walked slowly back into the dining room. As I entered, my friends immediately started clapping and singing, "Happy Birthday." My parents sat in the chairs, offering vacant, obligatory, tight-lipped smiles, barely clapping along. And then, halfway through the song, Clara abruptly stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. She walked purposefully toward me, her eyes locked dead onto mine. She didn't look angry. She looked completely, terrifyingly hollow, like a predator locking onto its prey. She stepped right in front of me, entirely blocking my path to the head of the dining table. "Let me help you with that, little sister," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the singing like a razor blade. It was dripping with a sickly sweet, venomous, mocking sarcasm. Before I could process what was happening or pull the heavy stand away, she reached out and firmly gripped the thick glass edges of the cake stand. For a split, agonizing second, we were both holding it. I looked directly into her eyes, my expression shifting to confusion and then to a silent, desperate, heartbreaking plea. I was begging her with my eyes not to ruin this one single, beautiful night. Just let me have this one thing. Clara looked right back at me, her lips slowly curling into a cruel, triumphant sociopathic smirk. She leaned in incredibly close, invading my personal space until I could smell the sharp, acidic tang of expensive Cabernet on her breath. She lowered her voice to a harsh, lethal whisper directly into my ear, ensuring no one else could hear her. You were never loved, Maya. You are nothing but a pathetic ATM. You will always be nothing. And then, with a sudden, violent, aggressive motion, she wrenched her hands forcefully downward, breaking my grip on the glass. She didn't just accidentally drop the cake. She actively, purposefully, maliciously threw it to the floor with all her strength. The heavy, thick glass cake stand hit the oak floorboards and shattered into dozens of sharp, jagged, dangerous pieces with a deafening explosive crash. The beautiful, $500, three-tiered chocolate masterpiece literally exploded across the dining room floor. The rich, dark ganache and thick raspberry filling splattered violently across my expensive beige heels and the hem of my designer dress. The delicate hand-spun gold sugar flowers I had admired just months ago were crushed instantly, pulverized into the hardwood amidst the shards of broken glass. The entire dining room went dead, paralyzingly silent. The joyful singing stopped so abruptly it left a ringing in my ears. My friends gasped aloud, in absolute unmitigated horror, a few of them jumping out of their seats. I stood there, completely frozen like a statue, staring blankly down at the ruined, destroyed cake. The flickering golden candles had been instantly extinguished in the catastrophic, messy explosion of chocolate and broken glass. Oops, Clara said loudly, breaking the silence. She dramatically stepped back, putting her hand to her chest in a cartoonish, exaggerated gesture of fake, theatrical shock. Oh my God, my hands are just so incredibly slippery today. I am just so clumsy. I'm so sorry about your little cake, sweetie. I guess we'll just have to skip dessert. I didn't look at Clara. I didn't care about Clara. I looked directly across the room at my parents. I waited. I stood there with chocolate covering my shoes, and I waited for them to finally, just once in 30 agonizing years, stand up and defend me. I waited for my father to yell at her. I waited for my mother to rush over to reprimand Clara, to apologize to me, to help me clean my dress, to show even a single, microscopic ounce of protective, genuine parental instinct. My mother stared at the mess, her face contorting into a mask of deep annoyance. She let out a heavy, incredibly irritated sigh. Oh, Clara, for heaven's sake, you really need to be more careful. Look at the massive mess on the floor. The chocolate is going to stain the grout. Now who is going to clean all of that up? Maya, don't just stand there. Go get the heavy-duty paper towels before it sets into the wood. My father didn't even bother to look up from scrolling through his phone. He just muttered, "Make sure you sweep up the glass properly so the dog doesn't step on it." Neither of them asked if I was okay. Neither of them acknowledged the blatant, malicious, undeniable cruelty of what Clara had just intentionally done. They weren't horrified by the psychological abuse of their youngest daughter. They were just mildly annoyed by the physical mess on the floor that inconvenienced their evening. In that agonizing, silent, chocolate-stained eternity, standing in front of my horrified friends and my apathetic family, something fundamental, deeply rooted, and ancient inside my chest completely, irreparably broke. But it wasn't my spirit that broke. It wasn't my confidence. It was the delusion. The pathetic, desperate, childlike hope that I would ever, under any circumstances, be loved, valued, or respected by these people simply evaporated. It completely dissolved into absolute nothingness, burning away like fog under a scorching sun. The crushing, heavy, suffocating weight of constantly seeking their approval, of buying their affection, vanished entirely. And it was replaced instantly, beautifully, by an absolute, frigid, diamond-hard, terrifyingly sharp clarity. I looked down at the ruined, smashed cake for one last moment. Then I slowly looked up at Clara. She was watching me intently with a smug, victorious, deeply arrogant smile, waiting for the fallout. She was waiting for me to cry. She was waiting for me to scream, to throw a tantrum, to provide the massive, dramatic, emotional reaction she so desperately fed on. She wanted a fight so she could play the victim. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even frown. I looked her dead in the eyes and I smiled. It was a calm, completely unbothered, deep, and terrifyingly peaceful smile that reached all the way to my eyes. Clara's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, entirely unnerved by my reaction. You're absolutely right, Clara, I said softly, my voice perfectly, flawlessly steady and resonant in the dead silent room. I wasn't. And you have no idea how incredibly liberating it is to finally realize that. I turned gracefully to my horrified, speechless friends. I offered them a genuine, warm smile, apologized profoundly for the abrupt, messy end to the evening, and calmly asked them to please leave, assuring them I would call them tomorrow. They didn't argue. They grabbed their coats, gave me deeply sympathetic looks, and hurried out the front door. Once the heavy front door clicked shut behind them, the house fell into an oppressive silence. I didn't go to the kitchen to get the paper towels. I didn't clean up the cake. I left the shattered glass, the ruined sugar flowers, and the smeared chocolate exactly where it fell. I turned on my heel, walked right past my confused, blinking parents, walked past Clara's faltering, uncertain smirk, and went straight down the hall into my massive home office. I walked inside and quietly, firmly locked the heavy solid oak door behind me. Sitting in the quiet, cool dark of my office, I sat down in my leather executive chair and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my face. The emotional attachment, the guilt, the familial obligation. It was all completely, entirely gone, cleanly severed like a dead limb. I operated with the cold, silent, lethal, terrifying efficiency of a highly trained surgeon removing a malignant tumor. First, I logged securely into my primary corporate banking portal. I navigated through the menus to the supplementary, high-limit platinum credit card I had foolishly, generously issued to Clara in her name 5 years ago. It was supposed to be for absolute emergencies, but she routinely, shamelessly maxed it out every single month on designer clothes, luxury spa treatments, and expensive dinners. I clicked the button to permanently cancel the card, reporting it to the bank as deactivated and destroying the account entirely. Second, I logged into the auto financing portal for the luxury car dealership. I was the primary leaseholder and the sole financial guarantor on her $80,000 top-of-the-line Range Rover. I canceled the automatic monthly payments. I clicked the option to officially, legally terminate the lease agreement early. I authorized the dealership's recovery department to immediately dispatch a tow truck to recover the vehicle from my driveway, voluntarily paying the massive $5,000 early termination penalty in cash, straight from my checking account without a single second thought. It was the best money I ever spent. Third, I logged into our family cellular provider's dashboard. I was the master account holder. With 3 simple, satisfying clicks of my mouse, I permanently disconnected Clara's phone line. With 2 more clicks, I permanently disconnected my parents' phone lines. I wiped their access to the cloud. Finally, I opened a blank legal document template I kept on my hard drive. I drafted a formal, legally binding, aggressively worded 30-day notice of eviction for all current occupants of the property, citing the termination of their month-to-month tenancy at will. I printed 3 crisp, flawless copies on my laser printer. The paper was still warm from the machine when I methodically folded them and slid them into crisp, white, unmarked envelopes. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. I walked quietly into my master suite, ignoring the whispers coming from my parents' bedroom down the hall. I packed 2 large, heavy-duty suitcases with all my essential, expensive tailored clothes, my expensive jewelry, my vital legal documents, my passports, and my high-end electronics. I went online and booked a long-term, ultra-luxury penthouse suite at a 5-star hotel downtown for the next 2 months. Then, I opened an airline website and booked a first-class, open-ended ticket to Kyoto, Japan, leaving the following week. A dream trip I had always desperately wanted to take, but never did, because I was too busy working 80-hour weeks to fund their miserable, parasitic lives. The morning after my 30th birthday dawned bright, incredibly cold, and beautifully quiet. The sun streamed through the massive kitchen windows. I sat alone at the pristine marble kitchen island, fully dressed in a sharp, tailored navy blue suit, my hair perfectly styled, my packed suitcases sitting neatly by the front door. I was calmly drinking a cup of dark, rich coffee at exactly 8:30 a.m. Breaking the silence of the suburban morning, I heard the heavy, loud, grinding sound of a massive commercial tow truck backing aggressively into our long concrete driveway. Its yellow lights flashed brightly against the living room windows. 5 minutes later, Clara came absolutely storming down the grand staircase, looking frantic, puffy-eyed, and thoroughly disheveled in her expensive silk pajamas. She was furiously, aggressively tapping the cracked screen of her iPhone, looking like she was going to have a panic attack. "The Wi-Fi is completely down," she yelled, not even bothering to look at me or say good morning. "And my phone says absolutely no service. I've restarted it 3 times. I have a highly important brunch reservation at the club in an hour. I need to call my stylist to bring my shoes. Go into the utility closet and fix the damn router, Maya." I didn't move. I took a slow, deliberate, incredibly satisfying sip of my hot coffee. "I didn't just turn off the Wi-Fi, Clara," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "I permanently canceled your phone line." She stopped dead in her tracks in the middle of the kitchen, finally looking up from her dead phone, her brain struggling to process the words. Her face contorted into an ugly, deeply entitled, furious scowl. "What the hell are you talking about? Are you insane? Turn it back on right now. Are you seriously throwing a massive, pathetic temper tantrum over that stupid, cheap little cake? Grow up!" Just then, my parents rushed into the kitchen through the hallway, looking equally panicked and entirely confused. "Our phones aren't working," my father said, his voice rising in an anxious pitch, holding up his dead device. "And there is a massive tow truck in the driveway. They're hooking chains up to Clara's car. Maya, go out there and tell them they have the wrong address." "What is going on?" Clara shrieked. It was a high-pitched, guttural sound of pure terror. She ran past me to the large kitchen window. She watched in absolute, paralyzing horror as the burly tow truck driver easily hoisted her beloved, prestigious, status symbol Range Rover into the air and began to slowly, methodically pull it out of the driveway and onto the street. She frantically tried to dial 911 on her phone, screaming at the top of her lungs that her car was being stolen by thieves. But her screen simply flashed us only. "Oh, no service, it's not being stolen, Clara," I said calmly, placing my coffee mug on the marble counter with a soft clink and standing up from the kitchen stool. I smoothed the lapels of my suit. "I terminated the lease this morning. You don't own that car. You never owned that car. I do. Or rather, I did. Now it legally belongs to the dealership again. They're just collecting their property." The kitchen went dead, utterly silent. It was the exact same heavy, suffocating, terrifying silence that had filled the dining room the night before when the glass cake stand hit the floor. The only sound was the distant rumble of the tow truck driving away, taking her entire social identity with it. My parents stared at me, their mouths hanging wide open in profound, uncomprehending disbelief. Clara spun around from the window, all the blood draining from her face, leaving her incredibly pale. Her eyes were wide with a sudden dawning, catastrophic terror. The smug, Victory bully from the night before was completely gone, replaced by a terrified child blessing the safety net had just been cut. "What? What did you do?" she whispered, her voice trembling violently. "I took your excellent advice," I said. I picked up the 3 crisp white envelopes from the counter. I walked over with measured steps and handed one directly to my father, one to my mother, and thrust the last one forcefully into Clara's trembling, perfectly manicured hand. "You told me last night," whispering in my ear so no one else could hear, "that I was never loved," I said, looking Clara dead in the eyes, holding her gaze until she physically shrank back. "You made it abundantly, perfectly clear that I am absolutely nothing to you or to this family, but a convenient, pathetic inconvenience to be abused. I spent 30 agonizing, miserable years twisting myself into knots, paying off your debts, funding your lives, trying to buy your affection. But last night, staring at that ruined cake on the floor while you all watched me bleed, I finally truly accepted it, and accepting it set me entirely, completely free." My father ripped open his envelope, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped the paper. His eyes scanned the legal notarized document. All the remaining color drained from his face. He looked like he was going to have a heart attack. "An eviction notice? Maya, 30 days? You can't do this. This is our house. We raised you here. You can't throw your own parents out onto the street." "You lost this house 5 years ago, Dad," I replied, my voice completely devoid of any anger, sorrow, or sympathy. It was entirely surgical. The bank was going to throw you out on the street with absolutely nothing. I bought it. I own the deed in its entirety. I pay the astronomical property taxes. I pay the electricity you are using right now. I have been financially carrying this entire ungrateful family on my back for half a decade while you actively enabled Clara to treat me like garbage. I thought I could buy your love. I was horribly wrong. It was a bad investment. So, as a businesswoman, I am officially cutting my massive losses. I turned my attention back to Clara, who was frantically, desperately pulling a platinum credit card out of her designer leather wallet, as if the plastic could shield her from reality. Don't bother trying to go to the mall to stress shop to calm down, I said smoothly, pointing at the card. The platinum account is permanently cancelled. Your personal bank account, the one I generously transfer your massive allowance into on the 1st of every month, has been drained to zero. You have absolutely nothing, Clara. The clothes on your back are yours to keep, but the luxurious, fake, glamorous lifestyle you've been bragging about on Instagram for 5 years to people who don't actually care about you is officially, permanently over. Clara's arrogant, smug, impenetrable facade completely, spectacularly, and violently shattered into a million pieces. The crushing realization of her absolute, unmitigated, inescapable ruin crashed over her like a tidal wave of ice water. She was 32 years old. She had absolutely no marketable job skills. She had zero savings. She had no car, no phone, no credit, and in exactly 30 days, she would have absolutely no home. Her knees buckled. She physically collapsed, falling to her knees on the kitchen floor, right next to a lingering, sticky smear of chocolate from the night before that no one had bothered to clean up. She broke down into hysterical, ugly, gasping, primal sobs. It wasn't a fake cry to get attention. It was the sound of a woman watching her entire universe burn to the ground. Please, she wailed, reaching out with both hands to grab the hem of my tailored suit pants, her tears ruining her makeup. Please, Maya, I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I was just so jealous of you. I didn't mean any of it. You're my sister. You're my blood. You can't just leave me with absolutely nothing. I'll buy you a new cake. I'll clean the floors. I'll buy you 100 cakes, please. Just turn the phone back on. I looked down at her weeping on the floor. I searched my heart for a shred of pity, a shred of guilt, or even a shred of vindictive pleasure. I found absolutely nothing. Just a profound, overwhelming, beautiful sense of absolute peace. I don't want a cake, Clara, I said quietly, gently but firmly, pulling my leg away from her desperate grasp. I just want to be left entirely alone. I walked over to the front door, picked up my heavy suitcase handles, and walked right past my openly weeping mother. I walked past my stunned, paralyzed father who was staring at the eviction notice like it was a death sentence. I opened the heavy oak front door and walked out into the crisp, freezing, beautiful morning air. I got into my sleek sports car, started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and drove down the suburban street without looking in the rearview mirror a single, solitary time. The fallout over the next 30 days was absolute, unmitigated chaos, but I watched it all unfold from a safe, peaceful, highly insulated distance through my extremely expensive attorney. My parents desperately tried to hire a cheap lawyer to fight the eviction in court, but the paperwork I had drafted was legally ironclad, and they had absolutely no money to sustain a legal battle. When they finally realized I was completely serious and totally unreachable, they resorted to begging. They left dozens of frantic, weeping voicemails on my lawyer's office phone, promising that Clara would change, promising that they would go to family therapy, promising that things would be completely different if I just came home. I never replied to a single message. When the strict 30-day notice was officially up, the county sheriff arrived at the property to enforce the legal lockout. My parents and Clara were forced to pack whatever they could carry and move into a tiny, cramped, deeply depressing 2-bedroom apartment on the bad, industrial side of town. The rent was funded entirely by my father's meager, monthly Social Security check, which barely covered the utilities. Clara's life completely, catastrophically imploded. Without my endless stream of money to fund her glamorous, influencer facade, her wealthy, shallow friends immediately and ruthlessly abandoned her. Without a car or a working smartphone, she was entirely stranded. I heard through a distant gossipy cousin a few months later that Clara was utterly desperate for cash and was forced to get a minimum wage, grueling job working the cash register at a local discount retail store just to afford basic groceries and bus fare. The uniform and the name tag completely stripped away the arrogant, golden child persona she had worn like armor for 30 years. She is completely miserable, intensely bitter, and entirely forgotten by the society she tried so hard to impress. As for me, I spent an entire glorious month traveling alone through Japan. I watched the pink cherry blossoms fall in Kyoto. I ate incredible, Michelin-starred food in Tokyo. And I finally learned how to breathe without the suffocating weight of my family on my chest. When I came back to the States, I immediately put the massive suburban house on the market. It sold in a week for a massive, multi-million-dollar profit. I took the cash and bought a beautiful, ultra-modern penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city skyline. I surrounded myself with friends who actually value my presence, a challenging career that deeply fulfills me, and a quiet, beautiful, fiercely independent life that I built entirely with my own 2 hands. Sometimes, when I'm walking downtown and I pass by a high-end bakery, I catch the rich, sweet scent of dark chocolates and raspberry ganache. Drifting into the street, I stop for a moment. I think about that 30th birthday dinner. I think about the loud, echoing sound of shattering glass, the ruined sugar flowers, and the cruel, venomous whisper in my ear. But I don't feel a single ounce of sadness or anger anymore. Clara genuinely thought she was destroying me when she maliciously dropped that cake on the floor. She thought she was putting the quiet, invisible stagehand permanently back in her place. She didn't realize that by showing me exactly, unapologetically who she and my parents truly were, she finally, mercifully gave me the explicit permission I so desperately needed to walk away from them forever. She broke a $500 cake, but in doing so, she inadvertently handed me the keys to the rest of my beautiful, unburdened life. And for that profound, unintentional gift, I will always be incredibly, deeply, and eternally grateful.